So actually, I think yesterday some of you heard a talk from Vricon. So we actually had Vricon grab us some 3D data for this area, which they quickly put together. And it was interesting because it was actually just after an attack on the airfield. So we can actually kind of see some of the before and after and some of the damage, even just in the 3D Vricon data, which I found to be very just interesting to see that, kind of see how the attacks unfolded. So that's our foundational intelligence information, right? This is that, to me, it's bread and butter. This is what we've been doing all along in the intelligence community. Now what you, of course, want to do is say, well, how do we use ABI? So to use that, we want to think about what the potential future is going to be. And this is the analysis that James has done. This isn't the Ben Conklin analysis special. What they've identified is they've basically said that, with the pulling out of the Islamic State, they believe there's going to high potential for a renewed East-West civil war. They've really been focusing on fighting the Islamic State, so that had been basically serving as a buffer. With them pulling out now, there's that potential conflict renewing again. In addition to that, there's another potential scenario that might unfold as well. Oh, sorry, let me focus on this one still. So one of the things that they identified for us, which is really key for us from an ABI perspective, is what are the potential key flashpoints that we're gonna need to pay attention to if that scenario unfolds. And it's really the major road intersections that are in that kind of border area. And then also they do a lot of airborne strikes and attacks along the coast as well. So if things like that start happening, it's going to tell us that this scenario is unfolding. The other thing that they're also, of course, looking at is what is the Islamic State going to do? Is all the reporting on this tells us they've kind of consolidated in the south and the tribal areas. What does that mean? Well, they might reconstitute and then maybe do terrorist and kind of asymmetrical attacks, assassinations, and other things in the cities. So now we've kind of laid out the scenario. All of that was real world, and all that's the analysis done by James. What we're going to do now is just walk through a very simplistic, kind of simple example of how you would use ABI to help with some of the intelligence questions. So if you go back to the presentation from earlier, we're going to apply those 4 pillars of ABI and leverage some of that enabling technology. So we've been accessing all that foundation data, it's stored in the cloud as part of our WebGIS, and now we're going to leverage the computing and analytic resources of the WebGIS to do some ABI analytics with it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to decompose the problem, right? This is probably, this is Intelligence 101, is you take your large intelligence question and you start to decompose it into sub-questions. And what we're trying to do with that decomposition is say, well, which questions could we answer based on activity? What kind of discovery process could we apply to understand the activity in the area? So what we're really looking for is, what is the pattern of life of individuals, and is there anything that they're doing that's going to give us an indicator of any kind of potential future attack? So from there, from deciding on the question we're going to answer, we basically identify our starting point. And there's a fundamental concept in ABI that's this who, where, who concept. So basically it's, you either start with a place, or you start with a person, and then you kind of go from there. You extend your knowledge in your network. So in this case, we're going to start with a where, which is the flashpoints, and then we're going to try to find some who's, some people, and then we're going to extend and find more wheres, and then more who's, and extend our network and our knowledge in that way. And this is a very common technique that you would use in an ABI context. So what we're going to do in order to do that is we're going to start to apply some real-time analytics. So the modeling that we're going to do is a process I like to just refer to as movement analysis. It's based on research that's done by Google and Microsoft on how do you predict people's behavior based on their location information that maybe they're sharing with you voluntarily, or in our case, maybe not intentionally voluntarily sharing it with you, but it's coming from all kinds of sensors. It's coming from social media check-ins, accidental on purpose. It's coming from observations in the field. It's coming from SIGINT data, your traditional intelligence sources. Using that, we basically can, in real time, fuse that information together, correlate it, and use it to do some real-time pattern of life analysis. So we model that in our real-time server. We create models that basically help us model that same kind of pattern that we're talking about, basically tracking their location activity and tagging it and automatically enriching it. And this is that key concept, like I was saying before, is you want to do the analysis and the enriching and the conditioning as much as you can at the point of entry, and have the data come into your system and use that as a way to as you're receiving it. From there, of course, you want to go ahead and understand the pattern of life. So basically, the way that we do that is we have our simple kind of dashboard application that shows us that same data that as it's being enriched, that gives us a view on that data. And so what we're looking at here is the pattern of life data coming in from this activity. And what I mentioned before is we started with a where. So we picked those flashpoints, those road intersections. We geofenced those road intersections, and we said, just give me all the reporting in those areas. And what you would do as an analyst is you'd start to just sift through that reporting. You'd look at the correlated reporting. You'd look at the records. You'd look for suspicious individuals. You identify people that are operating that area that maybe normally don't, or otherwise, and then you follow that lead. You go, okay, here's the, now I went from a where, now I have a who. For that who, then now you start to do the full pattern of life analysis for that individual. You say, where else do they go? Where else do they operate? And what else do they do? So we see that they have movements and activities in different areas. In ABI, there's the concept of different kinds of locations, discrete, semi-discrete, and non-discrete locations. So you try to find places they go that are unique to them, and that might be unique to the group of people they associate with. You find the other people they're associating with, and you extend your knowledge following that pattern. So in this case, you know, the guy that we're following, he went back and hung out in this town. He didn't go to a military base, but he associated with a bunch of military people. And so from there, we can kind of follow that lead. We can start to look at, well, what's his association and how does he fit in? So let's go back to the story map. So that's how you kind of leverage that real-time system. And one of the key things within this, of course, is what you're needing to do is integrate all the reporting in. And that integration comes in many ways. You might have structured reporting coming in. You might have people filling out forms and applications, etc. But basically, you integrate that reporting. You look at that information. And then that's that principle of geolocate to discover. So even text data, you take it, you process it with things like locate.xt, you place it on the map. So for example, we have a human report here that talks about a suspicious ship. Well, it falls into our area, it's close to our suspicious actor. So what we want to do now is we want to apply this, we've talked about the real-time analysis, now is where you want to start to go back and use that sequence neutrality. You've been collecting data, and now you need to see if that data actually helps you understand or develop or expand your pattern. So in this case, we have all the shipping data. So we have a human report about a ship. We have all the shipping data from AIS stored in our big data store. We can quickly query that data, so we can go across millions of records, query that data out. We have the raw tracks, but we can also do things like look at patterns, like speed patterns, activity patterns. And in this case, for the shipping data, what we wanted to do is it was a report of a shipping vessel. We just want to see if it's doing anything suspicious, right? Shipping vessels have a typical pattern of their own life or their own activity pattern. And in this case, the shipping vessel looks like it's doing shipping things, fishing things. It's going out, it's fishing, it's coming back. So it's really not that big of a deal. But it's the kind of thing that you as an analyst would start to do. You start to follow these different leads. So if you go back to the story map. So, in terms of digging through our data, what we really found is kind of the strong connection was the connection between that individual and this military unit. And that's what we probably explore. And what we're doing with this is we're combining real-time analytics and this forensic analysis. And I think really that combination is really the key here. The real-time is helping us trigger, it's helping us kind of tip, it's helping kind of queue up maybe some resources or some analytics. And then the big data and the periodic analysis is what's helping us really put the context around it and answer the questions that we need to answer for our intelligence analysis. So from there, we'll go ahead and go down to the next one. So I was mentioning this earlier, we looked at the pattern of life, we looked at the activity, we found some new connections based on the location types. And we said, okay, this is a discrete location, so if somebody's there at the same time as our individual, they're very likely meeting together, that identifies a strong connection, then those individuals are probably something we should pay attention to. So we combine all those techniques together, and obviously I'm grossly oversimplifying the analysis process. And what we figure out is, okay, these military guys, well, they're part of an artillery unit. And the reason we know that is we had footage of them conducting training. And we also had them being somewhat undisciplined in terms of OPSEC, doing check-ins on social media and other things at places nearby the training. So we figure out they're an artillery unit. And so what we could then reasonably figure out at this point, with obviously some other confirmation, is that this individual is very likely connected to the artillery unit. He's doing advanced targeting. So this is kind of confirming that idea that they're very likely going to do an attack. They're very likely going to try to take these road intersections. Our knowledge of them and their tactics reinforces that. So that gives us a new item to consider. It's something we need to now do our traditional analysis on. We look at where the artillery unit is, where they could go in a certain amount of time, and then we start to do traditional intelligence. You create your name's area of interest, you start to monitor it, you know what the activity is leading to. So part of why we're able to do that is that we took the video and we actually captured structured observations off that video, right? So again, this goes back to the intelligence enterprise. Our analysts are analyzing video or captured structured observations, so those observations fit into our analysis, and we're able to use that to actually make some kind of determination. So we were able to use the video to drive structured observations and collection from that. So to go from that, we'll go back to the story map. So basically, in summary, obviously grossly simplified scenario, just so we could get through it quickly. What we did is we took the different ABI techniques, and we go to the actual summary graphic. So basically, we took our foundational intelligence information, everything we knew about Libya, we used that to drive our initial hypothesis and questions. we geofence some areas based on that, and we use that deductive, who, where, who kind of logic to create new models and new analytics. We use big data storage to do that forensic analysis and to look at patterns, and we use real-time processing to help alert and tip and cue us in our process. So that's a very quick tour of how you would apply kind of technology and ABI principles to a classic intelligence problem. And I also hope it helps you see how ABI kind of nests inside of a larger intelligence enterprise. It answers certain kinds of questions where activity is key, where discovery is key. All right, so with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Okay, we've got about, so the speakers have been impeccable so far in keeping to time.
Surprisingly so.
Yeah.
I told you we'd be terrible, so I guess I've made up for it. Yeah.
So we've got time, about 5 minutes for some questions. And again, any from, we'll start with